right, good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. So these are survivors from Sukkot. Oh, there's a purpose in everything, amen. And, I'm so blessed to be here. And we've been going through a series on Torah basics. And actually, this should be number 7. That should be part 7. And so today we're going to pick up where we left off, and this is on the 4th commandment. And as we go through this, I'd like you to look for patterns, for themes, and because I think by the end of this series here, you're going to look at the Sabbath as more than just a day that we're commanded to rest. All right, so function and purpose. What is the function and purpose in remembering the Sabbath day to keep it holy? So I'd like to ask you, what is keeping Shabbat in your minds? What does it look like? What are some of the things you think we should do, what we shouldn't do? So I'd like some input. So your understanding of the Shabbat, from reading the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, what's the purpose of Shabbat in your mind? And there's no right or wrong answer, okay? But what I want to do is contrast your answers before we begin to your answers after we finish, okay? Some thoughts. Kara. Focusing on Yeshua, okay? A day of rest and praise Yeshua. Okay, Steve? We rest, we don't work. We get blessed. It's a wedding ring. It's a date night with Daddy. I like that one. It's a sign of his people. Yes. Yeah. So you're relieved of your burdens, from working, and relieving our servants of their work. All right. Jeff. A foreshadow of the kingdom. I'm going to end on that one right there. So, all very good answers. And so, we're going to look at, I just want to give you the view of Jews and Judaism, what they think the Sabbath is for. And of course, they've added a lot of things, but I just kind of want to go through, their idea and how they look at the Sabbath, and always want to give credit to where credit's due. So this was pulled from the Encyclopedia Judaica, and it was retrieved from the JewishVirtualLibrary.org. What is Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath? Okay, Shabbat to the Hebrews, verb cease, rest, is the 7th day of the Jewish week and is the day of rest and abstention from work as commanded by God. Shabbat involves 2 interrelated commandments to remember, zikor, and we're going to look at that Hebrew word zikor, and to observe, shamor, okay? So it involves 2 interrelated commandments to remember and to observe, all right? So again, this is just directly from the encyclopedia, and it just gives you their perspective on things, okay? So the etology, I had to look that word up. It's the investigation of the cause or reason for something. That's something we should always be interested in when we study the Torah, study the Bible, is what's the reason, what's the purpose that God is telling us these things, okay? The Shabbat is given in the first 2 chapters of the book of Bereshit or Genesis. Although the name of the day does not actually appear there, God worked 6 days at creating the world, and on the 7th he ceased working. And that's Shabbat, Mikol Mela Kto. I hope I said that right. He blessed the day, and he declared it holy. The special status of the 7th day and its name were disclosed to the Israelite people in the episode of the manna. So that was after the Genesis account of the Sabbath. The next account in the Torah was the account of when God rained manna down to the children of Israel. So this is the second time that the Sabbath is mentioned. So you remember the story where he disclosed to the Israelite people in the episode of the manna, God supplied each day's need of manna for 5 days. On the 6th day, he gave them a double portion, and to last through the 7th day, on which no manna appeared. And correspondingly, the Israelites were commanded not to go out at all on the Sabbath, but to remain at home on the 7th day. Thus they learned that the 7th day was a Shabbat of the Lord, which they must honor by desisting from their daily food gathering labor. According to the book of Exodus, work is to cease on the 7th day in order to give slaves and draft animals rest, a statute that must be observed even during the critical plowing and harvest seasons. The book of Deuteronomy's version embodies this humanitarian motive in its divergent rationale of the Sabbath rest. Israel is to keep the Sabbath so that its slaves might rest, and because God so commanded. I didn't put all this up there, but if you're interested in this, these definitions, I do have a copy of it. So God's instructions for building the tabernacle begins with an admonition to keep the Shabbat. So that's an interesting note there, indicating its precedence even over the duty of building the sanctuary. The Shabbat is then called a sign of both God's consecration of Israel and his 6-day creation. See Exodus 31. So we're going to read Exodus 31 here because it makes some interesting points here. So in Exodus 31, again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, starting in verse 1, and Yahweh spake to Moses, and he said, See, I have called by name Bezaliah, the son of Uriah, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, and in knowledge, and all manner of workmanship. Are you staying awake, Greg? Where's Greg? We lost Greg. Where'd he go? Marcel's still awake. Okay. All right. So God identified certain individuals, filled them with the Spirit of God in wisdom, understanding, and in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship, right? To devise cunning works, to work in gold and silver and in brass. And he says, And behold, I have given with him Oholiab, the son of Ahishamach, of the tribe of Dan, and in the hearts of all that are wise-hearted I have put wisdom, that they may make all that I have commanded them, the tabernacle of the congregation, the ark of the testimony, the mercy seat, and all the furniture. So the context here is God is speaking to Moses. He has selected certain individuals of the tribe of Judah, which is interesting, to lead this up, and gave them the spirit of wisdom and in all manner of workmanship, okay? And he says, and I want you to build these things after the pattern that I show you. Okay, and then I'm going to drop down to verse 12. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh that doth sanctify you. What does sanctify mean?
Set apart.
Set apart. To make holy. Okay, so Yahweh is telling us this Sabbath is a sign between me and his people throughout all generations, that you may know that I'm Yahweh that does set you apart, that make you holy for my purpose. He says, You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, it is holy unto you. Every one that defileth it shall surely be put to death, for whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days may work be done, but in the 7th it is a Sabbath of rest, holy to Yahweh. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. Now you notice every time Yahweh repeats something, why does he do that? It's of great significance, okay? He's trying to get your attention here. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And he gave unto Moses when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone written with the finger of God. So in this passage here, Yahweh begins to tell Moses, I have selected certain people for you to build my tabernacle, to do, melting of the gold and the silver and to make all these things, all right? And then he reminds them about the Sabbath day, to not work on the Sabbath day. So even in doing God's work in building, the physical building of the sanctuary, they were to rest on that day, okay? All right. And it's interesting in verse 18, and so when he gave unto Moses, and then he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him on Mount Sinai, the 2 tables of testimony. So what was God and Moses doing up on the mount? They were doing a lot of discussion, right? They were communing with one another, right? And Yahweh was imparting to Moses some very important things to impart to the people. All right, so the Sabbath is a sign. And so looking at the concordance, try to give us a sense of the definition of some of these Hebrew words, the word sign comes from number 225 in the sense of appearing, a signal, as a flag, a beacon, a monument, an omen, a prodigy, evidence, and it's translated a mark, a miracle sign, and token. Now it comes from the primitive root of the word number 225, uth, and it means properly to come, that is, to assent. All right, so this idea of a sign not only is something that's a signal, okay, a flag, a beacon, a monument, but it's also tied to this idea of to come, to assent. So what does that make you think of, that word assent in the Bible? Going up to the mountain. What was on the mountain?
The fire.
The fire. What else? Well, okay, and let's go forward. So ascending, so Moses, the pillar, okay, pardon? The temple. Okay, so the mount, what Moses went up to on Mount Sinai was like a form of, what did he do up there? He communed, he met with God, right? And he communed with him. And the whole reason for the tabernacle and the temple was so that men could approach unto God and to be in his presence, right? And to commune with him. So I want you to think about these connections that we're saying with the Sabbath and some of the things and the themes and ideas that are connected with the Sabbath, okay? It's not just a day that we decide we're not going to work. There's a lot of people that don't work on the Shabbat, right? Are they keeping the spirit of the law in the Torah? There's many people out there. I'm talking people that don't even believe in God, okay? And so what's the purpose? It's more than just resting from the things that we create in our livelihood, okay? It's also connected to this idea of communing, of ascending to being in the presence of God, all right? So we're going to see some of these connections as we go forward. Okay, the nature of Shabbat. Again, this is still coming from the Encyclopedia of Judaica. The nature of Shabbat. The Shabbat is one of the best known and least understood of all Jewish observances. People who do not generally observe the stringencies of the day think of it as a day filled with stifling restrictions or as a day of prayer like the Christian Shabbat. But to those who observe the Sabbath, it is a day of great joy, eagerly awaited throughout the week, a time when we can set aside all of our weekday concerns and devote ourselves to higher pursuits. So in their mind, the Jewish mind, the Sabbath was a day of great joy, a day that they eagerly awaited for at the end of the week, a day when they could set aside all the weekday concerns and devote themselves to higher pursuits. So do you think this was something that Yahweh had in mind when he gave us the Sabbath? Okay? And I had a point here. Did everybody have a good time during Sukkot that came? All right. Do you know that Sukkot we honor that, we observe that as a rehearsal for a time that we're going to Sukkot with our Creator for eternity, right? And so do we look eager for that day? Okay. So as we look eager for that day, this idea of looking eagerly for that day is tied into Shabbat, okay? We look forward to that day. I remember when I was first, the feast days were first brought to me and asked if I wanted to go. You know, my first thought was, I only had so many weeks of vacation. Some of you heard this already. I didn't want to waste my vacation going to a religious feast. I wanted to do my thing. I'm just being honest with you. And but I decided to go, and after I went and I experienced it, I kept on going. And I realized, and I thought I knew my Bible pretty well, and because my Uncle Dave always pushed me to teach and to study, and so I appreciate that about him. But when I went there, I learned how little I knew, because there were people from all over that would come, and you'd get to fellowship with them, and of course, many of them had their own platform and their doctrines that they wanted to push on you, but I learned how little I knew. And so it was a humbling experience. And so I continued to go, and then I ran into an elder there that was from Texas, and he just had a really humble spirit about him, and they invited us down. So the following year, we went down to Texas, and I just fell in love with the people, the elders especially because of their humble spirit. And you could sit and you can ask them any question, and they would just tell you in a very kind and humbling way. If it went against your grain or your thought process, they just walk you through the scriptures, and it was refreshing. And so I went there for probably around 20 years. And so when I asked you about how you enjoyed the Sukkot, the vision here and what's been created here came from this place in Texas, because the elder down there, when I first went there, we have these preconceived ideas in our theology. And the Sabbath, to me, was a day that, you went to church and you sat there, you listened, you got taught. You didn't go out and play. You didn't do any of that stuff, all right? You just had to sit and listen and be taught. And it wasn't a very pleasurable day, for my kids as they were growing up. But down there was this amusement park that was built all the way around the church. But you went in and you did your Shabbat service and your teachings, and then you had your meal, and after that, the amusement park became very, very busy for the whole day. And I asked the elder about that. I said, I didn't think we were supposed to do our own pleasure on the Sabbath. And he said, well, let me open up the Word and show you where you have pulled that text from, and let's look at the context. So to make a long story short, the context did not fit the way I thought. Our pleasure is you can define a lot of things under that heading of pleasure, right? But what we want to look at is what is God pleased with, okay? Because you will find that most men, their pleasure is their work, is the things that they do, the things they create. That's what they were created to do. And so if God didn't give me, at least, a day of rest, I would work 7 days, and maybe many of you are like the same. So that was the context. And so, but he told me this. He said, I wanted this day, the Sabbath day, to be the most special day of the week for the children. And it was. I saw that assembly grow from 100 people to it's 200-300 right now. And the children loved to come, and they would invite their friends, and they would come. And as the children grew up, they would marry. Sometimes they'd marry outside the assembly, but their spouses would then come, and they'd have children, and it just blossomed. And so, why am I sharing this with you? Because the Sabbath, what Yahweh had intended for us when He gave it to us, was similar to He wants this day to be the most special day of the week, because it's a foreshadow, it's a rehearsal of the day we're going to be with Him and commune with Him and spend the day with Him, right? This is a rehearsal for that. And so that's why as we go through this, it's not just a day where we rest. We can do that anywhere. You know, you could sleep in your chair at work. You know, you can find places to go hide at work and sleep, and rest. That's not keeping Shabbat. Keeping Shabbat is resting from your daily work, the things that men love to do, and communing with our Heavenly Father, coming into His presence, okay? The Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered, He's in our midst. So when we come, this is a microcosm of what's to come. Okay, so let's move on here. So in the eyes of a Hebrew, a Jewish person observing Shabbat, it was a day of great joy, okay? And Yahweh wants us to look at the Shabbat as a day of great joy, because one day, I believe, Yeshua is going to enter into one of our Shabbats, okay? And we don't want to be sleeping at home, or we don't want to be, out visiting, other things, doing other things. We want to be here, okay? All right? So, let's see what I lost my place. So the nature of Shabbat. Okay. Now this is interesting. Okay. In Jewish literature, poetry, and music, Shabbat is described as a bride or queen, as in the popular Shabbat hymn, Lakah Dadi. I don't know if I said that right. So in their mind, in their literature, in their poetry and music, the Shabbat is described as a bride. Now, how does that connect with what we've learned about God's appointed times and His rehearsals? How does that connect? Does the marriage supper of the Lamb sound familiar? But they look at the Shabbat as a bride, okay? All right. And it is said, more than Israel has kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept Israel. Shabbat is primarily a day of rest and spiritual enrichment. The word Shabbat comes from the root shin bet tav, meaning to cease, to end, or to rest. Zakar, the word remember, to remember the Sabbath day. Again, we have different ideas of what the word remember means. We're commanded to remember this Shabbat, but remembering means more than just merely not forgetting to observe Shabbat. It also means to remember the significance of Shabbat, both as a commemoration of creation and as a commemoration of our freedom from slavery in Egypt. Now, the first one is I've always connected with, but the second one, I never really tied that to Shabbat. But it is. It's a day, a commemoration of our freedom from slavery. All right. So, Zakar, to remember. The word means it's a primitive root, properly to mark, so as to be recognized. That is, to remember, by implication, to mention. Also, denominative from 2145, to be male. Brad Scott, this was an interesting point I'll never forget from Brad. He noted that the root of this Hebrew word for remember, zakar, means to speak or act on behalf of another. Now, next week we're going to go in and expound on that. So the Sabbath, to remember, is more than just not forgetting. It has something to do with of us acting as a representative to speak or act on the behalf of another. One example I can think of is when Yeshua was on the cross, on the tree, and there were 2 thieves next to him. And the one says, remember me when you're in the kingdom. And he said, from this day forward, you will be with me. So how did Yeshua respond? It wasn't a thing that he was asking Yeshua, don't forget me. I mean, it was in one sense, but it's the action that follows that puts meaning to the word remember. So Yeshua acted on that. And he said, you will be. So what did he do? He forgave him and gave him the promise of eternal life. So remembering is more than just not forgetting. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, after the 4th commandment is first instituted, Yahweh explains, because for 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, And on the seventh day he rested. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and sanctified it. By resting on the seventh day and sanctifying it, we remember and acknowledge that God is the creator of heaven and earth and all living things. We also emulate the divine example by refraining from work on the seventh day, as Yahweh did. If Yahweh's work can be set aside for a day of rest, how can we believe that our own work is too important to be set aside temporarily? In Deuteronomy 5 and 15, while Moses reiterates the Ten Commandments, he notes the second thing that we must remember on Shabbat. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that Yahweh your God brought you forth from there with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm. Therefore Yahweh your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So now we see there's two things related to keeping and remembering the Shabbat. The creation, that he's the creator, and then he brought us out from the land of slavery. So what does the Exodus have to do with resting on the seventh day? Because it's all about freedom. As I said before, in ancient times, leisure was confined to certain classes. Slaves did not get days off. Thus, by resting on the Shabbat, we are reminded that we are free. But in a more general sense, Shabbat frees us from our weekly concerns, from our deadlines and schedules and commitments. And during the week, we are slaves to our jobs, to our creditors, to our need to provide for ourselves. On Shabbat, we are freed from these concerns, much as our ancestors were freed from slavery in Egypt. Okay. Is Greg sleeping somewhere? Is he resting somewhere? I think he's sleeping. I think we should remind him that there's an action that goes on with remembering the Shabbat. Okay. We got to pick on Greg. All right. So the Jewish celebration of Sabbath, they remember these two meanings of Shabbat when they recite Kiddush, the prayer over wine, sanctifying the Shabbat. And Friday night, Kiddush refers to the Shabbat as both, it says some Hebrew words, a memorial of the work in the beginning and a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. So when they bring in Shabbat, these prayers that they do remind them of the creation and of their freedom from slavery. So real quick, a typical Shabbat for a practicing Jew. It says that at about 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon, observant Jews leave the office to begin Shabbat preparations. The mood is much like preparing for the arrival of a special beloved guest. The house is clean, the family bathes and dresses up, and the best dishes and tableware are set. A festive meal is prepared. What does this sound like? I think of Isaiah chapter 24 and 25. When the Lord shall prepare a table for us, okay? In addition, everything that cannot be done during Shabbat must be set up in advance. Lights and appliances must be set. The Shabbat, like all Jewish days, begins at sunset because in the story of creation in Genesis, you will notice that it says in the evening and the morning one day. From this, we infer that a day begins with the evening, that is sunset. Shabbat candles are lit, and a blessing is recited no later than 18 minutes before sunset. This ritual, performed by the woman of the house, officially marks the beginning of Shabbat. 2 candles are lit, representing the 2 commandments, to Zikor and to Shemor. Again, this is just their tradition, okay? But I just want to give you the idea of how they look at Shabbat, which may be a lot different of how we always looked at Shabbat. Okay. The family then attends a brief evening service, about 45 minutes. After service, the family comes home for a festive, leisurely dinner. Before dinner, it is customary for parents to bless their children. Then the man, you found him. You found him. Was he sleeping? Oh, Then the man of the house recites Kiddush, a prayer over wine, sanctifying Shabbat. The usual prayer for eating bread is recited over 2 loaves of challah, a sweet, eggy bread shaped in a braid. The family then eats dinner. Although there is no specific requirements or customs regarding what to eat, meals are generally stewed or slow-cooked items because of the prohibition against cooking during Shabbat. These things that are mostly cooked before Shabbat and then reheated or kept warm are okay. After dinner, They do a grace after meals. After this is done every day although this is done every day on Shabbat, it is done in a leisurely manner with many upbeat tunes. By the time all this is completed, by 9 p.m., the family has an hour or two to talk or study Torah and then go to sleep. The next morning, Shabbat services begin around 9 a.m. and continue till about noon. After services, the family says Kiddush again and has another leisurely festive meal. Typical afternoon meal is cholent, a very slow-cooked stew. By the time this is done, it's about 2 p.m. The family studies Torah for a while, talks, takes an afternoon walk, plays some checkers, or engages in other leisure activities. A short afternoon nap is not uncommon. It's traditional to have a third meal before Shabbat is over. This is usually a light meal in the late afternoon. And then Shabbat ends at nightfall, when 3 stars are visible approximately 40 minutes after sunset. At the conclusion of Shabbat, the family performs a concluding ritual called Havdalah, separation division. Blessings are recited over wine, spices, and candles. Then a blessing is recited regarding the division between the sacred and the secular, between Shabbat and the working days. As you can see, Shabbat is a very full day when it is properly observed and very relaxing. You really don't miss being able to turn on the TV, drive a car, or go shopping. So that's just a little, a history of how Jews practice their Shabbat. So what were some interesting points that we covered? In the Jewish observance, remembering the Sabbath involved a commemoration of creation, a commemoration of our freedom from slavery in Egypt. The Sabbath was a day of anticipation, celebration, and great joy. Friday before Shabbat, they prepared as if a special guest was coming to dine with them. The root word for remember is the card in Hebrew, according to Brad Scott, means to speak or act on the behalf of another. It involves action. And Yahweh sanctified. He made it holy the Sabbath day after creation was completed. So back to the original question, what is the purpose of Shabbat? Its function and purpose in remembering the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Well, if we quickly look at the definitions, there's 2 words that are used for rest and for Shabbat. 7673, it sounds like it's pronounced Shabbat. A primitive root to repose, that is to desist from exertion, used in many implied relations. And then, I don't know the difference in the pronunciation of these 2 words. It looks almost the same. Then 7676 is Shabbath. Intensive it comes from 7673. Intermission, that is the Sabbath. So that's some basic definitions from the Strong's Concordance. Now, I always like to go back and look at first use to help us give an idea of what the Hebrew words actually mean from their beginning, from their root. Because the first use typically defines the basic meaning of the Hebrew words. So the first mention of the Sabbath is in Genesis 2. Although it doesn't use the word Sabbath, it uses the word rest, one of those words that Sabbath comes from. So thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So now I have a interesting question for you all. How did Yahweh, and how did Adam and Eve spend their first Sabbath day? Did Adam, make a cot and hang it between 2 trees and just lay in there and rest? He hadn't worked that whole week. So how did God and how did Adam and Eve spend their first Shabbat?
Chilling and talking, sitting around the fire.
What do you think? It doesn't say, but we have patterns, and we have, if we understand, the purpose, we have an idea. I think Yahweh and Adam spent the whole day together, communing with one another. Just as Moses was on the mount receiving instruction from God, They were communing together. Do you think Yahweh spent the whole Sabbath just resting and doing nothing? They were talking. Adam spent time with his Creator and setting a precedence. Okay, so again, when we think of Shabbat, it wasn't just the day that we were commanded to just not do any work, but it's intended, the action behind that rest is spending time with your Creator. And where did Adam and Yahweh do that? Where in the garden? And what does the garden represent? The temple. What did the tabernacle represent? The temple. And what was it patterned after of? The one in heaven. You see, when all things are completed, the culmination of everything that God had promised, his goal and his promise to everyone that we will be his people and he will be our God and he will dwell with us, okay? The Sabbath is that constant reminder of that promise. And so as we come to Shabbat, we come with anticipation of joy, of great anticipation that his coming is very soon, and maybe it's going to be that day, okay? And in worship and to learn, that's what Sabbath is all about. We can't get that just staying in our own little comfort zone, when we don't feel like going, all right? It's more than just resting. I'm hoping you're seeing the pattern here. Okay. So we all agree that Yahweh and Adam probably did a lot of communing on the Sabbath, right? And we all agree that the garden was a type of the sanctuary, the tabernacle. Because remember what happened when Adam sinned? He got kicked out of that space. Why? Because it was holy. Okay? And what did the tabernacle provide after man sinned? A place where men could come back and try to reconnect, at least get somewhat close, So the second mention of the Shabbat is in Exodus 16, in verse 22 and 23. And it says, "And it came to pass that on the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said unto them, This is that which Yahweh hath said. Tomorrow is the rest, the holy Sabbath unto Yahweh. Bake that which you will bake, seethe that which you will seethe or boil, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until morning." So you remember this story. God rained manna. They went out, and they were only supposed to take so much. If they tried to save it to the next day during the week, what would happen? It would rot. But on the sixth day, the day before the holy Sabbath, they got to collect twice as much. And they baked and they boiled it, and it stayed over the next day and didn't rot. What does that tell you? That God provides for you on Shabbat. Okay? The third mention is in Exodus chapter 20. We're all familiar with this in the Ten Commandments. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 through 11, remember, and I put the Hebrew words up there in the Strong's numbers, just for your reference. Remember, Zakar, the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Kadesh. When did he make the Sabbath holy? From creation. He made the Sabbath holy back in creation. Okay? And again, I want you to look for patterns and themes here, and I want you to think about this word holy, what God has sanctified, okay? 6 days thou shalt labor and do all your work, but the seventh is the Sabbath of Yahweh. In it you shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your cattle, your stranger that is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it, made it holy. Okay. So what pattern do you see with the Sabbath? So all these scriptures that we've mentioned here, what are some of the patterns? Well, one, Yahweh sanctified it. He made it holy. He set it apart for his purpose, all right? So let's go back. Our original, when you gave me answers about what the Sabbath is to you, refraining from certain things. So if we go back and decide, okay, and I'm not picking on anybody here. I'm just trying to put it in today's situations. What if I decide to stay home and just mow my lawn? It's not working for any income. I don't get paid to do that. Or I decide I want to prune my trees. I'm not making any money. It's not making me anything. Or if I want to, weed my garden, so what if I wanted to do that? Okay. What do you think? It's not for his purpose. He gave us, what did he do? He gave us 6 days. Greg, what did he give us? How many days did he give us? To work. To work. He gave us 6 days. He's pretty generous. All he wants is one. He wants one, to remember his creation, to remember the creation he gave us, and to remember that we were slaves and he brought us into freedom. Okay? If I'm out there mowing the lawn, I'm doing what they would have slaves do. Remember the resting was only in their day in the ancient Near East, resting was only a privilege for the upper class. The rest had to work. They had to mow the lawns, they had to tend the gardens, they had to do this, they had to do that. Okay. But Yahweh freed us from that. Okay. So let's look at an interesting parallel and pattern with the Hebrew word kodesh, holy. It's a primitive root, causatively make, to pronounce or observe as clean, to appoint, to bid, to consecrate, to make holy, to keep, prepare, to purify. So this idea of a kodesh, when Yahweh sanctified the Sabbath, he made it kodesh, okay? And we see that in multiple passages. But now I want you to look at this interesting parallel with the Hebrew word kodesh. The first use of this word kodesh was in Genesis 2:3, which we already read. He made the Sabbath holy, right? Okay. The second instance where Yahweh sanctified and made holy was the firstborn in Exodus 13:1-14. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, sanctify, kodesh unto me all the firstborn. Okay? Whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, is mine. And Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which ye came out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand Yahweh brought you out from this place. There shall be no leaven eaten. This day ye came out in the month of Abib. So what season is this? Spring. And he brought us out of Egypt. He brought Israel out of bondage there. Okay? And what else is involved in this? Now, it's interesting. He said, he made the Sabbath holy in Genesis 2:3. Here, all the firstborn are holy. And then he says, remember this day which you came out of Egypt. Okay? What day did they come out of Egypt? During unleavened bread? Okay? What's the first day of unleavened bread? It's a high Sabbath. Okay? So you see his connection? He's made the Sabbath holy. He's made the firstborn holy. He says, remember this day which you came out in freedom was the high day during unleavened bread. These are all connections. These are all parallels. And it shall be when Yahweh shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, and Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and the seventh day shall be a feast unto Yahweh. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with you, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all your quarters. And you shall show thy son in that day, saying, this is done because Yahweh did unto me, which Yahweh did unto me when I came forth out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be a sign upon thine hand for a memorial between your eyes, that Yahweh's law, his Torah, may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand Yahweh has brought thee out of Egypt. And thou shalt therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year, and that shall be when Yahweh shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, as he sware unto thee and to thy fathers, and shall give it to thee, that thou shalt set apart unto Yahweh all that openeth the matrix, and every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, the male shall be Yahweh's. And every firstling of an ass you shall redeem with a lamb, and if thou not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And all the firstborn of man among children shalt thou redeem. And it shall be when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, What is this? That thou shalt say unto him, By the strength of the hand of Yahweh he brought us out from Egypt, from the house of bondage. So, the Sabbath, it's a day to remember. It's a day that Yahweh was the one that created everything for us so that he could commune with us, and then he brought us out of bondage into freedom so that we could commune with him. Looking at the third instance where Yahweh sanctified, this time by the hand of Moses, was all the people that he brought out of Egypt at Mount Sinai. Exodus 19, verses 10, 11, and 14. So, and Yahweh said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them, kodesh them, today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the third day. For the third day Yahweh will come down in the sight of all people upon Mount Sinai. And Moses went down from the mount unto the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. So, what did Yahweh make holy from those examples that we just looked at? What's it? Sabbath? There's a connection there, people. Those three are all connected. And this idea of communing with him on a Sabbath is all tied into why the Sabbath is holy, why the firstborn are holy, and why you are holy. We learned that there's different levels of kedusha, or holiness, in the temple. And the further you go in, the more holy you had to be, right? The more set apart, the more sanctified. And the idea at the end of the age is that we're going to be able to stand before our Maker, and there will be no, separations, okay? But we will be able to look upon his face and talk and to commune with him. And this Sabbath is this idea of anticipating that day. So, patterns and connections of what Yahweh made holy. So we're about to close here. And Yahweh spoke unto Moses in Leviticus 19, verses 1 through 3. And he says, Speak unto the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, Ye shall be holy, for I, Yahweh, your God, am holy. Ye shall fear every man his mother, his father, and keep my Sabbaths, for I am Yahweh your God. So he's made you holy. He's made the Sabbath holy, so that we can come together before him. And I want you to see this connection of remembering the Sabbath connected to coming to his places of worship. Back in thousands of years ago, it was a synagogue. A synagogue was a microcosm. If they couldn't go to the temple, they went to the synagogue. Okay, and it was a rare thing often for them that were a long distance away from Jerusalem, for them to go up to Jerusalem to the temple. So the synagogues were like a mini temple. They can only do certain things in the synagogue. A lot of things that they had to be done in the temple, but it was a reminder for them that someday God will return, and they will be in his presence, and they will commune with him. So Leviticus 19:30 says, Ye shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. Is there a connection between keeping his Sabbaths and reverencing his sanctuary? Is there a connection? Leviticus 26:2, the exact same phrase. And what happens when he repeats things? He's trying to get your attention. Ye shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am Yahweh. Leviticus 23, 1 through 3. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feasts of Yahweh, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. And which one does he start with? The Sabbath day. That's the first one he mentions. So people, if you wonder why we have a meal after, because this is a feast day. It's a day of celebration. It's a day of joy. It's a day of anticipating his return. And if you read Isaiah 24 and 25, when he returns, guess who will be preparing that meal? It won't be us. It'll be him. It'll be Yeshua, and he will invite you to his table. This idea of coming to Shabbat is a precursor of, it's like him inviting you to come into his presence. You know, we looked at that word at the beginning, that had this idea of to call. Remember that Hebrew word, the word sign? The sign is a signal, a flag, a beacon, a monument, and it comes from another Hebrew word that means to come, to assent. And we know the Sabbath is a sign. The Sabbath is a sign of God's people because they want to be in his presence. They want to come into his presence. They want to be able to ascend that holy mountain and be in his presence. And again, this is just a microcosm of that because we all can't go to Jerusalem, but someday we will. But by coming here every Shabbat or going wherever to a congregation, you're acting on the idea of remembering. By acting and going, you're saying, I look and I anticipate for that great day when Yahshua returns and when he calls all nations to come up to his holy mountain to be in his presence. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh is a Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. So I ask again, so when there's times when we don't feel like coming, or we feel like doing something else, ask yourself, do I want to miss out on coming before the presence of my Creator? I know he's everywhere, but remember, he's made this day holy, and he's made you holy. And the idea of coming together is saying to him, you know that I'm your Creator, and you desire to be with me. And so I see that from Sabbath to Sabbath, from new moon to new moon. You know, in Zechariah, there's a prophecy there that all those who don't go up from Sabbath to Sabbath, and new moon to new moon up to Mount Zion to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, he's not going to give any rain on those people. So again, this idea of coming to Shabbat is your declaration that I look forward and I anticipate that day when we will go up to his holy mountain and to see him. Amen? Okay, the end. So I hope this gives you, we're going to continue on with part 2 in the coming weeks. And what we'll get into in that session is, what are some of the things that, since this is a holy day, that we should not do, okay? One of the things that I think it's posted up there in our kitchen, we don't cook on Shabbat. Now, not everybody has that we but we're going to go through the scriptures and kind of lay out some of those things that we can find with evidence in the scriptures that we should do and we shouldn't. And we'll look at the purpose. We'll take it right back to the divine purpose of why we shouldn't be doing those things, okay? So that's what we'll cover in part 2, okay? All right, may Yahweh bless you. So who's doing prayer request? Greg? All right.